Good evening. Welcome to the meeting of the Skokie Village Board for Monday, May 1st, 2023. This evening, we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Village Clerk Pramod Shah.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The meeting will come to order, and the clerk will please call the roll.
Trustee Sutker,
Here.
Trustee Robinson,
Here.
Trustee Kuhn,
Here.
Trustee Johnson,
Here.
Trustee Pure Slovin, Trustee Klein, Mayor Van Dusen.
Here, we have a quorum. Next item on the agenda is approval of the consent agenda for this evening's meeting. A motion is in order. Trustee Johnson, seconded by Trustee Pure Slovin. Is there anything on the consent agenda anybody would like to have removed? If not, call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker.
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovin, Trustee Klein, Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye. The motion passes. This evening, I will admit to having just a little bit of sleight of hand. I have a proclamation that I would like to read honoring a longtime employee of the village. And the reason it's on the agenda as employee recognition is that he has, for a number of years now, been the one who has overseen what we do in the evening. He does all of the filming of the village board meetings, which means he sees the agenda. And I wanted this proclamation of admiration and thanks to be a surprise. So, whereas Paul Lavery has enthusiastically worked for the village of Skokie Multimedia Division for over 25 years, greatly enhancing the village's outreach and engagement. And whereas Paul began his career at WGN as a TV engineer, filming news broadcasts for over 15 years to viewers across the entire Chicago metropolitan area. And whereas Paul and his wife Rosa raised their daughter Juliana within the village of Skokie, the man knows how to make an entrance. I'll say that for him. And Rosa is here as well. Did you, Rosa, stand for just a moment so everybody can see you. Thank you. Whereas Paul has contributed countless hours toward increasing the village's transparency and accessibility of information by filming every village board meeting, producing the village's cable stations and YouTube channel, photographing events, and creating numerous informational videos on village programs and services. And whereas Paul was intricate in creating photo and video content for the village's application to the All-America City Award, where we went on to receive finalist distinction. And whereas Paul will never truly be retired, as his voice continues to narrate the village's on-hold messaging system. Hopefully you haven't gotten caught up in that too much. And some of you may have heard of this, the alternate side parking information video. We haven't had to use that too much in the last couple of years, fortunately. And whereas colleagues, peers, friends, and family have expressed their profound gratitude, admiration, and respect for Paul's dedication to the village and his many contributions to the community through the years. Now, therefore, I, George Van Dusen, Mayor of the Village of Skokie, do hereby proclaim May 1st, 2023 as Paul Leveri Day in the Village of Skokie, and do hereby congratulate Paul on a well-earned retirement. You have to understand, one of the reasons why we are doing it this evening at a board meeting is Paul refused to let us have a party for him. So I figured this is the only way we can catch him, because he has to show up for work.
I thought I'd get a week.
Paul, congratulations. Next time.
All right.
Thank you. Rosa, come on up.
Step down.
Here we go. Come on.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'll do the meeting. I'm back up. I gotta finish it now.
Get back to work. And secondly, it's an honor to be able to recognize this evening the men and women of the Village of Skokie who keep us safe. We all are well aware of the first responders and the noble work that they do. But there's also quiet work that is done day in and day out. Well, somebody is calling us. They're the ones who go out to the buildings and do the inspections. They're the ones who check on the plumbing, the electricity, and keep us safe. I think this proclamation will summarize the work that they do. Whereas the Department of Buildings is committed to recognizing that our growth and strength depends on the safety and essential role our homes, buildings, and infrastructure play, both in everyday life and when disasters strike. Whereas our confidence in the resilience of these buildings that make up our community is achieved through the devotion of vigilant guardians, building safety and fire prevention officials, architects, engineers, builders, tradespeople, design professionals, laborers, plumbers, and others in the construction industry who work year-round to ensure the safe construction of our buildings. And whereas these guardians are dedicated members of the International Code Council, a nonprofit that brings together local, state, territorial, tribal, and federal officials who are experts in the built environment to create and implement the highest quality codes to protect us in the buildings where we live, learn, work, and play. And whereas these modern building codes include safeguards to protect the public from hazards such as hurricanes, snowstorms, tornadoes, wildland fires, floods, and earthquakes. And whereas Building Safety Month is sponsored by the International Code Council to remind the public about the critical role of our community's largely unknown protectors of public safety, our local code officials, who assure us of safe, sustainable, and affordable building that are essential to our prosperity. Whereas it starts with you, the theme for Building Safety Month 2023 encourages all to raise awareness about building safety on a personal, local, and global scale. And whereas each year, in observance of Building Safety Month, people all over the world are asked to consider the commitment to improve building safety, resilience, and economic investment in home and in the community. and to acknowledge the essential service provided to all of us by local and state building departments, fire prevention bureaus, and federal agencies in protecting lives and property. Now therefore, I, George Van Dusen, Mayor of the Village of Skokie, do by proclaim the month of May is Building Safety Month. Accordingly, I encourage our residents to join with us to participate in Building Safety Month activities. And I would like to introduce Angel Shore from our department. Angel, would you introduce
Yes.
your colleagues?
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board. The Community Development Department works closely with other departments and divisions to ensure our new and current buildings are safe and that neighborhoods are maintained. The staff responsible for the safety of our buildings come from many different divisions, including Building and Inspection Services, Engineering, Fire Prevention Bureau, and the Water Sewer Division. The staff representing us here tonight are from Building and Inspection Services, our Structural Inspector and Plan Reviewer, Steve Klocko, our Plumbing and Mechanical Inspector, Nick Orlick, our Electrical and Sign Inspector, Paul Hunsaker, our Site Inspector, Dave Zala, our Building and Zoning Coordinator, Nasco Palinkai, a Skokie resident, our Property Maintenance Inspector, Colleen Burke, a Skokie resident, Administrative Specialist, Jade Mosak, and Administrative Specialist, Sol Miranda. From the Fire Prevention Bureau, we have Deputy Chief Nick Eschner and Fire Prevention Specialist Tim Taylor, another Skokie resident. From the Water and Sewer Division, we have our right-of-way inspector, Faye Sander. From the Engineering Division, Transportation Engineer Eric Sanchez. And we want to call special attention to our department leadership, who we could not do this without. Community Development Director Johanna Neiden, a Skokie resident. Fire Chief Jeff Hoflick. Public Works Director Max Slinkard. And Engineering Director Russ Reichfeld. Thank you very much for everything you do. And thank you, Mayor.
And on behalf of my colleagues, I want to extend our thanks to you for everything that you do every day for the village. As the proclamation describes you, you're the guardians, and you're also the ones, I'm sorry to say, do not get recognized frequently, but you are the ones who keep us safe. And thank you very much for the many years that you've all given to us, Skokie residents and non-Skokie residents. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now, the report of our proud village manager, John Lockerbie.
Well said. Thank you, Mayor Van Dusen and Village Board. Good evening, everyone. Items A through E were approved as part of tonight's consent agenda. Item F is regarding a request for executive session. Pursuant to Section 2, Paragraph C5 and C6 of the State of Illinois Open Meetings Act, a closed session is requested and to adjourn therefrom.
A motion for executive session per the manager's request. Trustee Klein, seconded by Trustee Kuhn. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker?
Aye.
Trustee Robinson?
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn?
Aye.
Trustee Johnson?
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovin? Trustee Klein? Mayor Van Dusen?
Aye, the motion passes.
That completes my report this evening.
Next item on the agenda is report of our village council, Michael Lorch.
Thank you, Mayor, trustees. Good evening, everyone. Item A on my report for tonight was adopted as part of the consent agenda at the beginning of tonight's meeting, and that would conclude my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda, I think, is probably what most of you are here for. The village board taking up and voting on affordable housing. As you're all aware, I'm sure, the Plan Commission deliberated and produced a report which was sent and reported to the board at our last board meeting. We tabled the report in order to give everybody an opportunity to read, digest the report, give it due consideration, and this evening we will be taking it up. The way we'll proceed is according. Trustee Pure-Slovan has a motion that she would like to make for the board's consideration. Considering that will have a second, then we will begin for the village board to open for discussion. We will start with Trustee Sutker and work our way around. After every member of the board has had an opportunity to express themselves, I'll then ask if there are any additional thoughts, and then we will open it to the public for comments. Each person in public comment will be given 3 minutes. I'm going to be very strict about 3 minutes, but we do want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to express themselves. We then will have an opportunity for the members of the board for concluding comments, and then we will begin to take the vote. So with that, Trustee Pure-Slovan.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank all of those who participated in the Plan Commission's numerous sessions to form a draft of a proposed affordable housing policy for the village of Skokie. It is apparent that a great deal of thought went into the process and recommendations before us. The state of Illinois has a 10% requirement of its total year-round affordable housing. I would like to commend the village for exceeding this requirement, as Skokie is presently at 19% of affordable housing. Ideally, the plan should provide different recommendations for affordable housing based on the needs of the community. For example, the needs of senior citizens on fixed incomes are different than a family's requirements for housing, which could be different than essential workers, and I believe we need to address them separately. While I appreciate the totality of the plan, I recommend that we adopt it in phases. I would like to make a motion that we adopt the following affordable housing policy recommendations. The goals as outlined by the Plan Commission report, which to reiterate are: Goal A, study and assess the ongoing supply and demand for inclusive, affordable housing in Skokie. Goal B, preserve, protect, and improve Skokie's existing affordable housing to be accessible and sustainable. Goal C, reduce jobs housing mismatch and ensure that housing is available to all of Skokie's workers. Goal D, create new opportunities to increase Skokie's supply of affordable housing. And Goal E, support local and region-wide partners' efforts to promote and expand housing efforts. We should also produce an ordinance consistent with the reports on inclusion zoning. We should establish a fund whereby the village can accumulate money to establish a Skokie Land Trust as recommended by the experts before the Plan Commission. We should update the village comprehensive plan by creating a subcommittee of the Plan Commission made up of representatives from a cross-section of commissions and representatives of our upcoming districts, whose charge is to update the housing charter of the village's comprehensive plan. And we should include 5% inclusionary housing for all new developments. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a second to trustees? Trustee Klein. Okay. Trustee Sutker.
Just taking some notes. adjusting the motion. Oh, I'm sorry. Before I ask some questions or make any statements, I too want to publicly thank the Plan Commission, the village staff, especially Johanna Nyden and John Lockerbie and all the residents and groups who reached out to me. I'm always inspired when passionate people come to me to voice their views and opinions. I am very aware of the time and effort that went into this process. I know that I've been studying the topic of affordable housing for months, and the staff has been very responsive to my questions. I do have a couple questions to ask, if that's okay.
Of course.
Okay. I wanted to ask Johanna if you could. Hello.
Hello.
I just want to be clear on the types of housing that the 19.9% of affordable housing encompasses, please.
So my understanding of what, reading the act, the Affordable Housing Preservation, I'm going to mess the acronym up. It's owner occupied, that they create that number from the owner occupied housing units that are affordable at 80% of AMI, and the rental occupied units at 60% of AMI.
I guess I'm getting at more in the village of Skokie. Can you tell me the types of affordable housing? Like, I know we have senior facilities. I know we have group homes. Can you break that down
Sure.
a little
So
bit?
if they are affordable at those levels, they would either be considered owner occupied, or they would be rental. So I have looked at, confirmed that a affordable senior housing unit that's rented would be included in that, and it sounds like it is included in that count.
So in that mix is congregate living,
Mhm.
group homes, which I think we have 40, right?
I think it's 46, 43.
40. Okay.
I'm going to lose that
Around-
trivia
okay.
question. So
And then
The most of any suburb, I might add.
and the senior facilities, and then some general population apartment affordable housing.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
correct.
Okay, thank you. I have also a question
ahead.
for Corporation Counsel. Can you give me the legal, this was something that was asked by a resident, I think it's a good question, about is it okay to give the Skokie workforce population priority for affordable housing, or is it not?
The jumping off point for that, would be the village code in terms of the unlawful housing practices. And within that part of the code, we identify, of course, protected classes that are, I think, familiar to everyone. But it also does state source of income cannot be a condition. Now, that's kind of inverted. In other words, that was done to protect those in those classes. So the idea is you couldn't refuse housing to someone based on their source of income. But if I understand where you're going, it could be, as written, a prohibition against identifying any one particular group to get the benefits of a housing program. So the short answer is, currently I think our village code is an obstacle to that. We'd have to double check state code, and if it's the will or the desire of how this evolves, if it's just the village code, we could perhaps rewrite it. But I do believe that calling out any one group is probably legally not possible.
Okay.
But that's not an absolute answer, and it would just take a little more research, maybe perhaps rewriting. But as our code stands now, for well-intentioned reasons, source of income absolutely could not be a provision. I hope that was clearer than it sounded.
A little confusing, but thank you.
We would, the short answer is, right now, I think it would not be permitted under our code. We'd have to double-check the state, and if the state permitted it, we would have to do some rewriting.
Okay. Thank you. And then, just responding to the motion, I'm surprised that the motion on the floor does not follow the Plan Commission's recommendation to require 10% affordable units for developments with 150 units or more, I think it is. The Plan Commission worked for months to come up with this recommendation. The question for me is not whether we meet or exceed the percentage of affordable housing the state requires, but rather, who do we want to be able to live in Skokie? Right now, I'm a social worker. My social worker colleagues cannot live in Skokie. My niece, who is a preschool teacher in Skokie, cannot live in Skokie. And service providers, who are the essential workers in our community, cannot afford to live in Skokie. These hardworking people deserve to have Skokie as an option. In my mind, the whole premise of inclusionary housing is to provide a mix of income levels in a development, not to just provide segregated housing for certain lower income populations, although that is important too. If I were a developer, I would want a hardworking tenant to live in my building. I don't think 5% is aggressive enough to give low and moderate income employees an opportunity to live in a mixed income environment. I do agree with the land trust. I think I've been talking to the village manager for almost a year about the possibility of a land trust as a way to diversify and to maintain our affordable housing stock. I've seen it work in Highland Park with my clients where they are able to, I had a client who lost everything and she was able to live in a house with her 4 kids until her kids graduated high school through Community Partners for Affordable Housing. I think it's a great concept. As far as the advisory, what did you call it? Advisory committee?
You're talking about the comprehensive plan.
Yeah, to go over the,
Right, it would be a subcommittee of the Plan Commission from a cross-section of commissions. In our future districts to update the housing charter for the village comprehensive plan. That's a continued analysis.
okay, I mean, I like the idea of including residents from the different areas. I think that's a good idea. And I like the idea of getting not just Plan Commission, but other commissions involved in the process. So I would support that idea.
That's sort of what we did with the use of
Oh, I was
force.
gonna say that, yeah, thank you. It's we used it for the use of force, that model, and it was really effective.
Worked out well for
Yes, it was a very good idea.
Trustee Robinson.
Thank you. No, I felt like, talking about the educator in me, reading a ton of term papers. And finally, just so in the weeds, where you have to kind of walk away for a little while so that you can kind of really breathe a little bit. And I'm still not quite sure where that is. But I did write a few things that I wanted to say, and I know I'm going to miss some things because I've already scratched out a lot from my colleagues. So December 19th, I requested the Plan Commission to have a hearing on affordable housing, and I so appreciate the board for supporting that effort. And man, did we learn a lot. Selfishly, I did it so that I could learn a lot, but in the interim, I think our community has learned a lot. I appreciate all the presentations from our guests and our staff, big time, for putting in the work. I processed a lot with community members and staff to understand as much as I could, still processing and grateful to continue this walk with you. So I did want to thank the board again for your support, staff, plan, commissioners, and community members for being engaged with the process. And I do support a lot of what was recommended by staff. I do. The subcommittee, I'm figuring that out. I know there's an idea of a group. I know some folks call it, a potential commission, additional commission, and what that would be and how that would be outlined and the impact of that. But I'm not quite sure, and Mary, you can probably help me understand the commission itself and what is the impact on the village staff. And, because I do know we've had a freeze with staff, and just wondering after Trustee Slovin talked about just kind of parsing things out. Just is it doable? Can we do it with fidelity as a separate type of commission?
We can, if we do it based on the use of force model. Trustee Pierce-Slovin and I have had a couple discussions on this. What I think would work would be if we had a couple members of the Plan Commission. They are educated on this now, so we should take advantage of that. Human Services, Human Relations, Family Services, perhaps Public Safety. Plus, and we did this, and at the time, I was a little hesitant about whether we would actually be able to accomplish it, but we divided the village up into quadrants. Now, it wasn't based on population. This was not a scientific one man, one vote type of thing, which John is going to have to try and work with shortly, but basically just quadrants and one representative from each quadrant. The village is, you and I both know because we live in relatively the same areas, is very diverse. There are areas of the village that are very dense. The area where I live is north area. We have a lot of apartment buildings, so that area is pretty dense. There are areas of the village, particularly on the southern end, that are not very dense. They're almost entirely single-family homes, no multi-family homes, scattering of townhouses. So you've got different views on housing, not just affordable housing, but housing. And one of the things I think we do need to do is to update the housing chapter of the comprehensive plan. And I think this commission, if properly constituted, could address that. And a year from now, let's say, I think maybe if the trustee agrees, a year's duration to update the comprehensive plan. At that point, the board could decide, do we want to institutionalize the group as a housing commission, or do we wish to say thank you very much and disband? But one thing we do need to do, we've done it on sustainability, we've done it on use of force. We do need to update the comprehensive plan on housing, and I think this would be a way to do it. But I think we have to put a time. If you don't put a time limit on it, we're never going to get it done.
So I'm just trying to process it. The group, the subgroup that you were referring, Pierce-Slovin, could that start as a, I'm not quite sure how to say it, a group to kind of dig down in it and try to fine tune and finalize what that form could eventually be?
I think the answer is yes. We would have to first pass an ordinance creating the group. And then part of that would be getting commissioners. We would ask the chairs of each of the commission to lend us a member. And then we would do like we did with use of force. We would ask our residents to submit applications, and we would divide them into the 4 quadrants and recommend a representative from each quadrant to be on the commission.
Okay.
Mayor, can I address
Oh,
what
sure.
what trustee Robinson said? In this, I did say that because I wanted to acknowledge that we are going to go through a change within the village because of the districting. So I did include it as upcoming districts. So if we wanted to amend the language so that we don't have to wait until that's accomplished, so that it's quadrants, or just so that we show that we're looking at different areas, that everybody's represented in this. It doesn't have to be that language specific, but the idea was that we should ensure that there are people, that there are residents from every aspect of the village in different areas that are represented.
Thank you for that. Also wanted to ask the question about how frequently is the reporting for affordable housing? How,
You mean the percentage?
just the percentage?
It's done by the Illinois Housing Development Authority. I believe they do it every 2 years. 5 years, every 5 years.
Every 5 years, thank you.
I think they're coming up next year.
Timely.
Well, there's I don't think it's going to pass, but we're going into that fatal 2 weeks now at the end of session. So do not take me up on this, but Senator Gillespie has a bill, housing bill, that has passed the Senate. It's now been amended in the House, and it could come to the floor. It depends on, they've got to get all the appropriation bills done. So what is going to crowd out what? The speaker, I'm told, excuse the phraseology, is hell-bent on adjourning by the middle of the month, I think May 19th. So, and that would change the minimum 10% to 15%.
Not
Not
as
as
amended.
amended.
Not as amended. I mean, that could
The
change.
original bill.
The original bill coming out of the Senate was 15%. The House then went back to the 10%. That's where it sits now, but who knows, right?
It has to go to, it'd have to go to a conference committee.
But from what I understand from state legislators, as particularly our state, 4 state legislators, it appears that it's going to be the 10%. It went to a committee, the House committee, I believe, which tends to push things out pretty quickly. So there's a likelihood that it will pass at 10% during this session.
So the House and Senate will then,
Gail, you have
Well, then
no
debate.
different information? Yeah,
in the House,
well,
yeah. In the
That's all right.
conference, they could change it, which they've been known to do.
I'm sure I have more, but thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Trustee Coon.
Well, a lot of my questions got taken already. So just to reiterate, Trustee Pierce Sullivan, what you are proposing is establishing an ordinance to establish the fund for a Skokie Land Trust to have an update to our comprehensive plan with representation, whether it's from the district or quadrants, however we decide on that, and also the inclusionary requirement as well for new development. I've been looking at also just trying to understand overall how Skokie compares to our surrounding communities, thinking about the overall picture of recognizing the need for affordable housing in our community, and how do we achieve that goal. There's a lot of factors at play, and even just looking at the comparison of other communities, Johanna, if you can also speak about, some of the things that they have, for instance, is distinguishing the breakdown of affordable units and the requirements based on public versus private, versus what we're proposing, the tiered based on housing units. Like, what was the thought strategy around that in terms of setting that type of tier structure?
Sure. The thought around setting a structure was Skokie has quite a number of those smaller, we'll call them 80 to 90, 100 unit developments. They're the example that comes to mind off the top of my head is the Boulevard development on Skokie Boulevard. Not a big development, smaller lots. That is that under 150, and that's where there was some concern that you might be putting a developer in a tough spot on those land deals and the way the taxes are structured in Cook County, that it gets hard. So that's where the 5% came in. And then 151 units and above, you have bigger developments. That's a kind of construction that's a bigger styled construction. It's more expensive, so you're going to get more units. So that's where the 10% came. Trying to 5% for a big development is different than 5% for those smaller developments.
When you think about the scaling of those larger developments, also just kind of thinking about like 100 units versus 150, like how do you gauge where that magic number is, where we should look at it?
So it actually came thinking about the types of the style of construction.
Mm-hmm.
So what is often you see it, we just adopted some code amendments tonight regarding what is commonly referred to as stick built. So that's wood or steel construction on a concrete podium. So that's for the size of a lot you have in Skokie, that's about 100 to 150 units. So, but you get bigger than that, you're going to have. I'm sorry, my colleagues all just left. They can speak more elegantly about construction styles than I can, but you have a different structure. So it's more poured in place concrete. It's a superstructure. You have more steel, you have more concrete. It's much more expensive mode of construction, which is why you're going to get a bigger building, which is how you're going to get more units. So the delta changes pretty dramatically. You don't necessarily get a 200 unit, you might get a 300 unit building. So it just changes a little bit as you go. Or larger sites. We don't have as many larger sites in Skokie. They've been largely developed, but when you do have a larger site, you could do more of that stick built, which lends itself to more units.
I don't know how familiar you are with our surrounding communities and how they're set up, so I don't expect you to be an expert on this, but if you can help answer. One of the things that we look at is like comparing Skokie to other municipalities where I'm trying to get the bigger picture of they might have a higher inclusionary zoning requirement, but they're also trying to make up for having an overall lower stock of affordable housing to begin with. And there are certain communities that have both. They have the inclusionary zoning policies as well as a higher than the minimum affordable housing rate. So like, can you speak to that in terms of that balance and trying to find that balance?
Sure. I think the interesting thing about comparing affordability percentages trying to get to that apples to apples, there's another piece that I think is particularly unique when you look at the communities around here is patterns of development.
Mm-hmm.
So the community to our east has a very different pattern of development than our community, and the community to our west or even to the north. You have older neighborhood, you have older rail line development to the east. You have a different kind of affluence that's built up. It was formed around particularly, Wilmette, Evanston was formed around a university. You just have a different pattern of development. So the affordability number doesn't necessarily tell the whole story. I think the owner occupancy numbers and the number of rental units is also another interesting number to look at when you look at different communities. Skokie has, I think, 75% of our units are owner occupied. Evanston has, and because I happen to know this off the top of my head, I think it's something like 56%. So it's a different, when you think about how we have a different style of pattern of using our housing units here in Skokie. So looking at those kinds of things, and further you go up, you have more owner occupied. Further west, it's a mix of strong owner occupied versus renter. But Skokie has been a leader in a lot of the multifamily housing. When a lot of other communities were finding ways to not include multifamily housing, post World War II, Skokie was finding space for it. So I think we have a very unique building stock to work from on that goal for preserving and protecting existing affordable housing.
I appreciate you saying that, because that was how I got to Skokie, was being able to move into a multifamily housing unit as part of an immigrant family that wanted to keep the family intact. And there's a lot of value in that, especially in the diversity of the community that we live in today. One other thing I noted was just, I recognize the need for affordable housing. I recognize that the market right now is very challenging for many individuals and families. But also, when we look at the percentage of folks who are cost burdened, that number that we have in Skokie is consistent to the broader geographic area. So it's not unique to Skokie, but we're still trying to solve for something in terms of how do we recognize that there is an issue, and that we want to strive to a higher goal. I think I'm sure I'll have more questions, but that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Trustee Johnson.
Before my comments, I just want to make kind of a clarifying question. The motion that's been made, so am I correct that this would not be to take up all of staff's recommendations, but it would only be to take up the three mentioned, the inclusionary zoning, updating the comprehensive plan, and the land trust?
And all the goals, and adopt all the goals.
And to adopt the goals.
So it would adopt everything included in the goals?
No, no, that we agree to I reiterated what the goals are. And if you look at the goals, it doesn't give it specifically the 5 or the 10%. I'm saying that this is what we're going to do, but we have to take it in stages, and that's why I outlined it as such.
I guess, does this motion include, like, for example, the accessory dwelling units recommendation? So this would just be these three recommendations
For now.
for now?
For now.
Okay.
Just to if I may clarify.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that inappropriate? Okay, thank
Go
you.
for it, go for it.
To clarify, I think that it's a large plan.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot going on, and I don't think, in my opinion, that anybody can bite off all of it and be successful. So that's why I said I think we should adopt it in phases and keep coming back to the table and keep it and having more inclusion and keep growing the plan as we need to go. But for now, I'd like to see us set some goals so that we can get moving quicker. That's my idea.
I-
Thank you.
I think Trustee Pierce-Sullivan's right to kind of, I think we should be talking about which ones we want to prioritize, but I think there are a lot of recommendations in this report that are fantastic that I think we should be including. Let me give my comments. There's a lot about these recommendations that I would love to talk about, but I'm going to try to focus on staff's recommendation for an inclusionary housing ordinance and the resident recommendation for an advisory housing commission. Whatever we determine tonight, I'm really excited that we are poised to approve an inclusionary housing ordinance. I think this is a really positive step forward to ensure that new housing in Skokie is truly inclusive. And I think that the framework of what staff has proposed is overall pretty solid. In the proposed inclusionary ordinance, I really like that staff has prioritized on-site affordable units as opposed to fee in lieu options for developers. I like that staff has proposed splitting the inclusionary requirements between 60 and 80% AMI. I like that staff has proposed that affordable units would need to be a mix of all the unit types offered throughout a new residential building. So overall, I think that framework is pretty solid. My main concern is kind of with Trustee Setker is the percentage requirement for on-site units. Currently, we're looking at requiring that only 5 to 10% of new units be affordable. I strongly believe we should be looking at the 10 to 20% range instead. These two numbers have been coming up a lot, 10 and 20%. The The state requires that at least 10% of our community-wide housing be affordable. And so by that same logic, I don't think we should be considering an inclusionary housing ordinance under 10%. On the flip side, there's been a lot of talk about how possibly up to 20% of Skokie's current housing is already affordable. So if we're serious about maintaining Skokie's affordability and preventing that number from declining, I think we should be willing to consider an inclusionary housing ordinance up to 20%. So later tonight, before we finalize this, I definitely want us to vote on amending the on-site inclusionary requirement in staff's recommendation and increasing it to at least something between 10 to 20%. And maybe consider getting rid of the graduated two-tier approach that Trustee Kuhn was asking about. Lastly, I want to talk about a housing commission. I'm open to this idea about a subcommittee of the Plan Commission updating the section of the comprehensive plan on housing. But I think there's still very much value in talking about a housing commission. Out of all of the recommendations that we have received about fair and affordable housing, the proposal for a housing commission is really the recommendation I think that's most concerned with keeping this affordable housing conversation going long after tonight's meeting. And the more I've thought about this in the last few months, I think a housing commission would fit very nicely within our current system of advisory boards and commissions. And I think it also would align really well with staff's recommendations. We don't have an advisory commission solely focused on housing issues. We have our plan commission, but they're mostly focused on new development and really land use decisions more broadly. We have our human relations commission, which in the past has done a fair amount of fair housing work, but now is largely focused on DEI issues and anti-racism work and block parties and all sorts of great community building work, which is all wonderful. But an advisory commission focused solely on housing beyond just updating the comprehensive plan, I think would be a great addition to our system as a whole. Staff's goal A about studying and assessing the ongoing supply and demand for inclusive affordable housing in Skokie, a housing commission could absolutely help with that. The final goal about supporting local and region-wide partner efforts to promote and expand fair housing efforts, a housing commission could absolutely help with that. And so after we vote on this motion or staff's recommendations tonight, I'd like to ask that we also vote on the proposal for a housing commission. And lastly, I want to thank everyone who's participated in this, especially staff. I know staff has put so much time and energy into this. I know our plan commissioners worked on this a lot. And there's so many people in this room who have been following this process for months and contributing in really meaningful ways. And I thank you all. I wasn't kind of prepared to deal with this specific motion, but I think, before we vote on this motion, I think we at the very least should consider, I think we should either vote against this motion and vote to accept staff's recommendations as a whole with or without amendments, or take this motion and maybe add some things to it. If we were going to go with this motion, I would definitely want to add some of staff's other recommendations to this list. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Pierce Sullivan.
I think I've made a comment for now. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Klein.
I'm just full of questions. I did not prepare anything. I just listened. And there's a lot of new things on the table. We are right now, by your things, we are 19% affordable housing. What number are we trying to get to? Are we trying to get to a certain number? Or are we trying to just maintain the 19? Rhetorical.
Go ahead. Thank you.
It's the biggest housing problem I see right now for the village of Skokie are people who live in a home that can't afford it. And we are not helping them with any of this. And I think we are discussing things for people who do not live here. And I wish we were talking about things for people who live here. Trustee Sutker, I can't afford to live here now. Prices are astronomical. Taxes are through the roof. How many of you just got reassessed? I got killed. So next year, we're gonna be sitting here owing more money. We have to find ways to help ourselves, not people who are not here, but people who are here. As far as this number, this 5 or 10, a developer is a businessman. He works on profit. Profit is not a dirty word. A developer is not gonna come to Skokie, make a development where he loses 10% of his income. And any dwelling that he has to give its 60% AMI, he is not gonna make a profit on, is a rent. So he is going in, you're asking a developer to come in and do economic development, invest in this community, and we're telling him right out of the box, you're gonna lose 10% of your money. I'm sorry, I'm a realist. Ain't gonna happen. So I am definitely against 10%. I think it's anti-economic development. I think it accomplishes nothing except turn away larger developments. What other question did I have? That was the goals. And I have one question, the last question I will ask. I have talked to 3 different people, I got 3 different answers. Let's get a definition for inclusionary zoning. Somebody, give me a proper one. Okay?
It would be, as the word inclusionary says, that in the project, a percentage of the units would be set aside on site for the purposes of renting to low and moderate income people.
Okay, so just another word, the low-income housing.
Yes,
So, okay.
that's what it is. It's
I was told
affordable
something
housing.
else, so I
Yes.
apologize.
No,
Mayor, are you done?
sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, sorry. I passed up my opportunity to speak. If I'd like to go back to something that I said at the beginning of my remarks, which was not part of the actual motion. But I really feel very strongly, and you reminded me of that, we do need to look, obviously, at affordable housing, but I do believe that the needs of seniors, which you did say, on fixed incomes are different. And when I said that, I was referring to people who live here now. We don't want them to move away. And if I wasn't clear about that, I do apologize. And again, I would like to reiterate that I think that that's a different need than an essential worker. And I also believe that we have to look at it differently, at what family needs are. And one of the things I've learned in this process and didn't mention, and again, I apologize, and I don't know enough about it, and it's something that Gail Schechter, I thank you and your committee for putting in my head, was an intergenerational or multi-generational housing. I think there are other ways. And for those who don't know, and if I'm reiterating it incorrectly, I apologize. I'm trying to grasp all this knowledge that we're gaining. And that would be that someone who is a senior and wants to move out of their residence, but is also lonely, can move into some kind of shared space where you have your own apartment, but maybe a common kitchen with a family who's struggling because both parents are working. And then this person could be someone who's helping by making the meals, and then the family sits down together. I think that there are ways that we can be looking, and that's why I said, I think that we have to look at so many aspects of what we're trying to achieve, because we want to retain, I agree with you, the essential workers who live here should be, who work here should be able to live here, but we have to do it in a way that there's an economic sense to it also, because when, you're right, when developers come in and we become a stable economic village, it keeps our taxes down and allows us not to be socked with property taxes, et cetera. So there is a balance to all of this. I agree with you.
Well, can I just interject one other thing? Johanna, at the last meeting, some of her testimony, and correct me if I'm wrong, ma'am, we really have no say-so who gets into these, we'll call them affordable housing units. Is that correct, Johanna? Did you not say that last meeting?
So some communities will create a list, so you can create community partners for affordable housing. I see Rob's here. Not to put you on the spot, Rob. What you can create a list. So, for example, Evanston has a list of people who live in Evanston or work in Evanston, and then they can get pulled from that list when there are units available, but they have to meet the tenant screening process also of those units. So if
Do they get priority then?
they could potentially get priority if that's how you wrote your code, if you wanted to move forward with that.
Okay. Very much so. And there's more things to look at, and you even have to admit. My personal opinion, we are nowhere near ready to vote on this. But that's my opinion. Sorry. Thank you, Julian.
I think we do need to do the inclusionary. One of the conclusions I've come to over the past year is we've studied some of the projects that have come to the village board since we've all reassembled from COVID, is that developers have to be told up front when they come in. We tell them what their requirements are for electricity and the utilities. We will shortly begin to codify and do the same thing with sustainability in the building codes. What the percentage is the problem, trying to find the sweet spot. You want to encourage development, because that's how you add affordable housing. If you discourage development, then you don't get affordable housing, because you don't get projects. So what is the sweet spot? I don't know, but I've been in this business long enough to know that you don't decrease, you always increase. So if we were to take 20%, we'd never go down, but we would kill affordable housing in this village. I paid very close attention to every one of the projects that has come to the village board, and I've had the opportunity to talk off the record with most of the developers. And if you look at the spreadsheets, and if you look at the taxes in the village of Skokie, the property tax, and we're not alone, every North Shore municipality is facing the same problem. Every time I go to a meeting at the Northwest Municipal Conference with my colleagues, it's one of the chief subjects we talk about. What are we going to do about property taxes? One of the things we need desperately is for legislation to reform the way we finance our schools. 70% of the property taxes in Skokie goes to our schools. It's not the fault of the schools. They're doing their job. They're paying the teachers a living wage. They're providing good education. But we have to find a way. I am hearing across the board, all over the village, people complaining about their property taxes have gone up dramatically. And it's one of the things that every developer brings up to me, not just in Skokie, but everywhere, the taxes. I don't know what the sweet spot is, but I do think we need to at least make a beginning. I think Trustee Persloven has given us a guidepost. I do like the idea, trustees' idea of creating a commission that in a year would give us a housing chapter to the comprehensive plan. That becomes our guide for the future. It tells us, should we do something about accessory living? That's an area I think we do actually need to take a look at. We've been very rigid. Our fire department has had some very serious qualms about accessory living. I think in cooperation with our Fire Prevention Bureau, who, by the way, this evening we pointed out are nothing short of great, I think we can come up with a plan. But I think Trustee Slovan is absolutely right. We've got to take a look at all of the housing in the village and come up with a plan for the future. This evening, I think there are 2 areas where we are prepared. I shouldn't say we, you have to excuse me, I'm prepared to vote. And from my discussions with my colleagues, I think almost all of us are prepared to vote. I think we're all in favor of doing something on the land trust. It's a really interesting idea, and it has worked in a couple communities that I'm aware. We will need to create that through legislation. So we would direct the Corporation Council to prepare the ordinance. Same thing with the inclusionary, and the same thing with the commission. So I think we have at least I think Trustee Pierce-Slovan's motion gives us a guide for the future and changes things substantially. And it will tell developers where we are. And I think that's important, so that they will know and factor it in to their projects. So, Trustee Kuhn.
I actually have a few quick follow-up questions.
Sure.
I wanted to clarify and make sure that we're not arguing semantics here and understand the distinction of having a process where we're establishing a committee under the Plan Commission that's going to oversee the update of the comprehensive plan, the chapter for housing, that would potentially include additional study and understanding of our current housing stock, the community needs, some of the aims and goals that are sort of targeted by in terms of the request for a housing commission versus immediately establishing a housing commission up front, establishing the charter, understanding the makeup, and sort of thinking about what are we talking about semantics here, figuring out the timeline, or what's the distinction between establishing a commission today versus starting off as a committee under the Planning Commission, and that would evolve into a commission within a year?
This would be like what we did with the Public Safety Commission. It was a combination of public safety, human relations, family services. They did like our Plan Commission did. They came back and said, we think we need a use of force commission, which we now have. And that use of force commission is a combination of representatives from each quadrant plus at large. The idea here would be to set up a temporary commission to study housing in the village, rewrite the comprehensive plans chapter on housing, and then we would take up the next step, which would be, should we establish a commission to help us, which would be advisory, to help us oversee implementation of this housing plan. It would take in more than just the inclusionary in the land trust. It would take in all of the other elements of the Plan Commission recommendations.
What I'm hearing is that we have a model that has worked in the past in terms of a process and who would be part of that initial committee that would help, that have an existing role within the village commissions, and then also including residents at large that would help to inform and provide feedback to us as we move towards establishing a housing commission. Whereas Trustee Johnson, what you're talking about in terms of establishing a housing commission with the goal of being able to continue the conversation in lining with staff recommendations, like how would you see that proposal being distinct from the process that is being recommended?
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but so what's on the table is kind of a subcommittee, a temporary subcommittee with a single task.
Right.
Right. So a housing commission would be ongoing and could be tasked with any number of things related to fair and affordable housing. You know, we have a public safety commission, we have an economic development commission, we have a sustainability commission. A housing commission could be something indefinitely, that any time we're exploring policies related to fair and affordable housing, they could be a part of it. It could be something indefinite.
But what's the difference between establishing it today with still to be defined charters versus giving us some time to process all this information, the recommendation that came from the planning commission, and for us to go ahead and sort of have some more structure and feel confident about the charter of the housing commission? I'm just trying to understand the distinction.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I wasn't, tonight's the first time I'm hearing this suggestion, and so I haven't really thought about it. I'm open to this suggestion of a subcommittee, temporary subcommittee that's really just focusing on updating the comprehensive plan. That updating the comprehensive plan section on housing is one of the main recommendations that we received from staff. So I think getting going on that's a great idea.
And if I may interject, the idea is to try it as a subcommittee, and it might be that the subcommittee, after the recommendations in a year, might recommend that we establish a housing commission going forward.
Yeah.
But I think we need to have people who are involved in this comprehensive plan,
Yeah.
involved in it, and not, they've done so much work, I don't want to take it away either. That's why a subcommittee of it, in my opinion, was the way to go.
I understand. A housing commission is really, it's not a radical idea. Many communities have one. Wilmette has a housing commission. Evanston has a housing commission. I remember Trustee Kuhn, the first time we were in a meeting, the first time we met our former community development director, Matt Brandmeier, I remember him telling us that he was surprised that we didn't already have a housing commission. So it's not a radical idea.
I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure that I also understand the scope and the charter of the commission. And one of the things I would consider is expanding that scope also and thinking about housing and community development, right? Because those go hand in hand. And so for me, it's more of a question of, do we have enough information to establish a charter, or can can we take a little bit of extra time? Let's have the committee do the work in terms of defining the goals and what comes out of the comprehensive plan amendment. And one of that goal could be the establishment of some sort of commission, whether it's housing specific, housing community development, like what shape and form. So I'm kind of opening up a little bit that there could be more possibilities to explore
Totally.
within that context.
And just, to be clear, this isn't necessarily an either or. This is these are two options that could coexist. Yeah, I'm open to whatever.
Okay. And I'm going to go back to Johanna one more time. I'm going to go back and ask about the tiers because I want to understand the thought process behind there. Why would we not have it as a single tier, or like why the 2-tier recommendation? The 5% and 10%.
Well, I think another piece, which I didn't mention earlier, that occurred to me after I sat back down, is trying to find, and I think the mayor said it perfectly, the sweet spot of what works. And if you look at this, 11 by 17 document that we've shared a couple times in the packet, every community is a little, as you noted, is a little different. And trying to find that spot where we'll get development, so we get new units, but we don't discourage development by making something that just doesn't work for somebody's bottom line. And in my experience, developers just want to know going in. They just want to know where the electric goes, how many affordable units, what code we're using. When you have these things on the books, and when I talk to my peers in other communities and other people that work in this space, it's much, much easier once you have it set. So, but Skokie does not have one at this time. So finding that nascent jump, where does that make sense? And the Plan Commission landed at those 2 tiers at this time.
Do you think there's a possibility that because we're trying to find that balance, is it a matter of being clear on expectations up front? Or is there a possibility that it could also create some harm, unintended consequences as well?
My hope is that it would never create unintended consequences or harm. I think the idea is to just create something that works for the different sizes of development that you might see in Skokie. You have a lot of opportunity for smaller, that what is referred to as the missing middle. And so while that missing middle could get built, we want to make sure that missing middle is also has some affordable units in it. And some of those units are more affordable just by the construction type and where they might be, some of the rehab that we could see in some of the existing multifamily. But then there's the bigger developments that could probably stand to have that additional percentage if so desired by the body. I mean, if you look at the table, there's a wide range of different percentages, but I think it's because every governing body in each of those communities was searching for their community sweet spot, but also recognizing that affordable housing is a regional issue and looking to try to find a way to solve this. You know, each community is doing their part, but also not wanting to harm that part of that process.
And how does this affect any current conversations or proposals coming before the Planning Commission today, once we go ahead and adopt any sort of zoning?
So every developer that we're in conversations with, which isn't, I mean, the market is challenged right now, period, from other things. So I think Skokie's plans for affordable housing are probably the least of a developer's concerns. We have supply chain issues, we have capital markets that are very challenging, things that are very much outside of the control of our community or our state. But many of them have agreed to do on-site affordable. So we have, for example, the project on Nile Center Road. They agreed to do a percentage at 80% of AMI. So those units will be on-site. They did that voluntarily. And if a new development came in, we'd tell them this is what's coming forward, and we'd hope that whatever the recommendation is, that a developer tomorrow would do it even if it's not in the code, because that's what we're trying to push and set that expectation.
Okay, thank you.
I know we're not going to vote on this until after public comments, but just kind of in response to that Housing Commission conversation. For the motion that's been made, currently my biggest concern isn't the issue of a Housing Commission. It's really all the things that are left out in this motion. I think staff has made a lot of really great, really common sense recommendations. The motion that's been made doesn't include the recommendation about bolstering existing home repair programs, or the recommendation about creating a residential vacant home registry, or enhancing code enforcement of rental units, or allowing accessory dwelling units, or promoting Cook County's residential tenant landlord ordinance. So I think there's a lot. There's many components that I think are really solid that we shouldn't leave out. Yeah.
Okay, if anybody would like to address the board, just be aware, brought this along, 3 minutes, and I'm going to be very strict on that. So.
I'm actually pretty short tonight. I'm Aline Eliasoff, Skokie resident. I'd like to speak on the issue of affordable housing from a gerontological perspective. Before I begin, I want to mention the loudest and most bombastic voices in this room do not necessarily speak to the collective. The trustees represent all the constituents, and please be aware there's a silent majority that does not step up to this podium. I also want to make sure that the affordable housing is not political. It shouldn't be. As a practicing gerontologist, in my professional capacity, I'm aware of a cohort of people living in Skokie ranging anywhere from 70 to 100 years old. They're getting squeezed financially and forced to leave their homes and to leave Skokie. The model for retirement in this country is based on one's ability to save in a 401k, a pension, savings, and Social Security. The model is based on what the individual pays into the system. It pretty much does not adjust for inflation, and people are often outliving their savings. Social Security was never intended to be its only source of income. It was always made as an adjunct. I recently had the opportunity to meet a 93-year-old Skokie resident who resides in his home of 50 years. He depleted his savings on his wife's dementia care. Care in this country is not covered by insurance. It's all out of pocket. And for in-home care, 24 hours, the costs range from $250 a day to $700 a day, depending on who's providing the care and the needs. It certainly doesn't take long to drain savings at a cost of $75,000 to $250,000 a year. Additionally, any Social Security income was based on when he retired at 65 years old. At 93, that was 28 years ago. He recently fell and broke his hip. He's unable to walk. His care is now $460 a day. The only way I can provide him enough money to pay for his own care is to pull all the equity out of his house. Based on his retirement income, which is now only his Social Security, I can't find housing here in Skokie for him. He will leave Skokie, and this is not an uncommon scenario. I'm asking, like, how do we turn our backs on people who built this community with their own tax dollars? My ask is that you consider affordable housing. Remember, we are currently almost 100% higher than the state mandate, literally double. I would like the committee to look at allocation of resources to older adults to be targeted, I'm done,
Please,
to be
please.
targeted in that housing that accommodates their
3
needs.
minutes. Thank you. Please don't take it personally, anybody.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ethan Nagar. I am a longtime Skokie resident since 2006, realtor, and I serve on the board of directors for the North Shore Barrington Association of Realtors. Speaking to the affordable housing proposals, I want to urge you to take a cautious approach in the development of any mandates and fees. To be clear, we actively support the development of affordable housing and workforce housing in all Illinois communities. However, our community needs more than affordable and luxury housing, which is what we will get in the best case scenario if we adopt a mandatory inclusionary zoning ordinance. We have to remember the cost of developing housing units has never been higher. Inflation has impacted materials and labor and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future. Right now, we are in a housing crisis where we have a dramatic need for all housing, every type and price point is needed. The Chicago metro area region is short of meeting rental demand by approximately 48,000 units. Homebuyers are in no better shape as we are approximately 3.8 million units short nationally. The only way to get out of this housing crisis is to build more housing, period. How do we build more housing? Make Skokie the most attractive place to build housing for everyone. While inclusionary zoning could provide some potentially attractive benefits for developers, we need to embrace that many developers are not equipped to provide these units in new construction. This means many will simply not be able to obtain financing for projects in Skokie or will bypass our community for others that are more flexible and welcoming. Please know that we are more than happy to be a partner in developing policies that will work for producing housing for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey Siri, start a timer for 3 minutes. I'm Kimberly Polka. I live in Skokie. I got a timer here. I'm super tired and I don't have anything written, so I will be actually very quick. For the first time ever, I think I agree with Aline. I don't know where she went, or Daisy. I took care of my grandmother and my uncle. It's why I live in my house. I bought their house. We couldn't sell it. And all of my grandmother's equity was in her house. My uncle had dementia. It is a problem. And we moved them to Lincolnwood because we could not afford to keep them in Skokie and they could no longer live in their house. I ultimately, in 2013, a year after my grandmother died, we couldn't afford to keep him in Lincolnwood anymore. And we spent a lot of money to rehab our own house, to bring my great uncle back in the house because he had never married and never had children. It's a problem across the spectrum. We have people who are forced to move when their rents keep going up and rooting their children out of school, the only communities that they know. New developments, timely that I'm coming after you, sorry. New developments, I'm really tired of hearing how they're gonna lose money. It's a cost of doing business like anything else. If it's told to them up front, 5% is not enough. I said at the beginning of this process that I was also kind of tired of hearing 19%. That number's really old. I didn't know who any of you were or about these meetings until a year ago, and since then, I have looked back, and recently there's been thousands of luxury units approved that didn't include any affordable housing. Nobody in this room knows where we sit as far as affordable housing right now. So to quote a percentage of 19% that is old, out of date, is disingenuous. But I can tell you, I am super confident we're not at 19%. We should not be doing anything below the state minimum. We should exceed, and this is about the people who live here, but it's also about the people who work here. The people who work here are a part of our community. They can't afford to live here. We should make Skokie welcome everyone. We say that. There are other communities that have affordable housing, inclusionary zoning, lots of words, really tired, only slept like 4 hours this weekend. People are still building in those communities. There are other problems. When the building stops, it stops everywhere. If we do something reasonable, they're not gonna go somewhere else because our neighbors are doing it. 5% is not enough. And the Housing Commission. We have commissions for everything. The list goes on for days. And I also want to say, this side of the room, when you all spoke, Edie, when you started, I wanted to jump up and kiss you. I feel like people really care. And I'm not saying that this side of the room doesn't care, but it was like one after the other. My heart was warmed. We can do better. We must do better. 5% is starting at the very bottom. Just to say that we did something is just checking a box.
Hi, I'm Lauren Grodnicki. First, I would like to thank Trustee Scott Sutker. I also echo what Kim said, and I'm not sure that you could hear the comments in the back when you started, but there were variations on wow, and it was very appreciative. I think a land trust is a good idea, and especially if we have money to lend to hotel developers, I think part of that pool, we can also start a land trust. As far as making a housing commission out of the plan commission, I went to the plan commission meetings where there were hearings on affordable housing, and the staff did a lot of work, but there were also a lot of unanswered questions, and there were a bunch of things getting kicked around, and it seemed like some of the plan commission members didn't fully appreciate everything, and one of them even suggested that crime would go up if we had more affordable housing. So I urge you to create a housing commission, but not as a subcommittee of the plan commission. And this housing commission would take a detailed inventory of the housing stock, the condition, the energy use, the affordability, the income, if we're allowed to ask that question when we go in and we do the study, other parameters that I haven't thought of. I strongly agree that we need to update the comprehensive plan, as the mayor pointed out. And if we're going to include nursing homes and group homes and senior-only living in the affordable housing number, I don't think that's fair, because if we're worried about people with young children or people who work in Skokie, they're not going to be eligible for that housing. It might as well not exist as far as they're concerned. And then as an extreme, as far as not having affordable housing, I lived in Hyde Park for over a decade, and most of the employees in the service industry there do not live in Hyde Park. They come from Woodlawn, they're coming from Jackson Park and Washington Park and even farther away, and there's this subtext to those employees saying, this is not for you. And is that who we want to be? So I urge you to create a housing commission that is separate from the plan commission. Thank you very much for your time.
I'm going to wear my shades tonight because I have a sty on my eye and I don't want that on the camera. Hi, everybody. I'm Jasmine Savagala. Thank you for this conversation tonight. And I hope you all are preparing yourselves to open your minds and your hearts to serve not only the folks who make $100,000 or more in Skokie, but also the immigrants, the first-time college graduates that are still paying off student loans and trying to take care of their kids, the elderly, single mothers, single fathers. You know, we do need to make a profit here in Skokie. And we also need to include all of our citizens here and make sure that we all have a place to live. This is the problem that we have. You have some members here tonight that are having issue with finding affordable housing. It's not just people who already own houses that are having this issue. You have young families that are having a hard time staying here. We do need diverse housing for diverse Skokie, as Gail Schechter mentioned with the other folks. She co-wrote an article in the Patch. I suggest you all read that article. Children need to live in a racially and socio-economically diverse community. Housing is a human right. We need affordable housing for families with school-aged children. I'm just going to keep saying that because kids keep leaving school because they can't afford to live here. Please open your minds and your hearts. Our leaders should not need state legislators to push initiatives to require you to add affordable housing for families. We need to increase the supply of affordable housing for families. I've already said families are leaving. I mean, when you talk about making a profit and people won't come here, maybe those are not the people that we need here. You know, slavery made a profit, and it was horrible and it was wrong. Just like excluding families that belong here, that live here, that want to stay here. I've heard you share tonight your story of being an immigrant and being able to come here, and you are thriving. I just can tell personally that you're having a good time, a good life. All kids deserve access to being able to come here and live and stay, and their families that work, and they're not criminals. That's what I want to make sure everyone on this up here understands, because I've heard someone who's going to screen them. How do we screen them? How do we know who they are? There are good people that work hard that just need to be able to live here. They're not criminals. I've heard something similar to that here. I've seen it on Facebook. I'm just sick of that. Just because you don't have access to a lot of money does not mean that you're a criminal, or that you're going to cause a problem, or that you're going to litter. We need to serve every member of this community, not just the people who have a whole lot of money, not just people who live in certain areas, everyone. We need a housing commission, a diverse housing commission set up to help take charge of this initiative. Because as some of the comments that I heard here tonight are evident, that some people don't want this to be a really diverse place for everyone to live.
Thank you. Please, this is not a sporting event.
Thank you. I'm Gail Schechter. I live at 9033B Keating. I'm representing Skokie Neighbors for Housing Justice. And I'm also a member of the State Housing Appeals Board that enforces the state's Affordable Housing Planning and Appeal Act. And although I'm not representing that group, I do want to speak to that 19.9% figure. First of all, I wanted to, again, I want to echo everybody's thanks that you're meeting here. You're about to do something important for affordable housing. But I do want to reiterate specifically that the floor for inclusionary zoning should be 15%. The national average is 16%. Only 5% of towns among the nearly 300 towns that have inclusionary zoning, only 5% are using 5%. The majority are like 10 to 20, and the average, like I say, is 16%. And then that the affordability should be for renters should be no higher than 60% AMI. And I want to mention there was a concern raised about property taxes. Cook County, the Cook County assessor has a program now to as an incentive for affordable housing, and it is for developments that are not less than 15%, and in rental, and not more than 60% AMI. So if we want developers to come in and do this kind of housing, they can take advantage of that tax incentive. So if we have something that's too weak, it doesn't help a developer, it doesn't help anybody. So that's why Cook County passes based on a state bill that passed just a little under 2 years ago. I quickly wanted to mention about that number. The 10% threshold is 100% political. It has nothing to do with what makes for a healthy community. It was a number that was put out there, and the reason we can't get it higher is that there's a lot of pushback from the Illinois Municipal League and others. As Trustee Klein mentioned, what does that number even mean? The number actually doesn't say anything about whether the residents in any of these units can afford what they're, or in any housing can afford to pay for their own housing. 38% of Skokie households are housing burdened. It doesn't say anything about the condition of the units that people are living in. It doesn't say anything about whether the units are the proper size for the household. It doesn't tell you whether they're accessible or even whether they're close to transit. So that's something when you do a housing study you're going to find out. But that 19.9% number doesn't answer that. The other thing I wanted to mention about inclusionary zoning is that, thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't take it personally.
Good evening, Jan Bellotti, longtime resident of Skokie. I appreciate all your interest and your desire to do something for the affordable housing issue. I hope we can think about making a commission and studying it but doing something soon because the problem is really real. I hope we don't do something like Evanston where they just take money from the developers and put it in a pot and just think about it doing something down the road, because we really have a huge need. I know I can't, nobody can see what this is, but it's just the library flyer that comes out, and it shows people of all colors, all races, old, young, and that's what we really want Skokie to continue to be. And I know when people hear affordable housing, they think it's going to be, you know, people that you can't trust, people, they're going to have crime in our town, and we don't want those people in our backyard. But I think if you can treat every human being as needs, their own needs, and we all deserve to have a home and a roof over their head, that we will, people behave properly like they should. Most people will. And I'm really excited, and I'm looking forward to what you guys can come up with. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and trustees. My name is Rob Anthony. I'm the president at Community Partners for Affordable Housing. And I first want to commend you and thank you for having this conversation. It's complicated, it's a lot, it's difficult to get through all of this, and I really commend you for doing that. Community Partners for Affordable Housing, or CEPA as we call it for short, is a nonprofit organization that provides a broad range of affordable housing services, including housing counseling and education, home repair programs, accessibility programs, down payment assistance programs, foreclosure prevention, affordable rental housing, affordable homeownership programs, and we also administer community land trust programs and inclusionary housing ordinances. And so we have a lot of experience with inclusionary housing programs, and I attended several of the previous sessions that you held, and one of the things that seemed to come up a lot around inclusionary and the percentage of required affordable units is this fear of driving off development and stifling development. And I just wanted to try to alleviate some of those concerns. That concern comes up in every community that we work with. We help administer the programs in Evanston and Highland Park and Lake Forest, Northbrook. We're working with other communities as well. And this always comes up. And if you look at Highland Park has a 20% requirement, and they have seen hundreds of units developed since that ordinance passed. If you look at Evanston, there's been a lot of development in Evanston. Northbrook just passed their ordinance about a year and a half ago, and they have hundreds of units going through the entitlement process right now. And when Highland Park first adopted its ordinance, we met with developers and elected officials and community members. And the thing that really came out from developers was not the percentage that was required, but it was predictability. They wanted to know what was required of them, and they wanted some assurance that if they knew what's required and they did it, that they would have an efficient way to get through the entitlement process and have a high likelihood of being approved. A few years ago, we updated the inclusionary housing ordinance in Highland Park. We again met with developers and we developed some interactive financial models that I may have shared with Johanna, I'm not sure. But it really showed, and developers could put in their own cost per square footage and land costs and all those types of things. But it calculated the ROI with inclusionary ordinances and without. And a well-designed ordinance like Highland Park resulted in a very small difference in the ROI for the developer. Yet these ordinances are a way that you can really promote the inclusive and diverse and sustainable and welcoming communities that we're trying to achieve. So I just wanted to try to encourage you to think about that 5%, and it is definitely a much smaller number than peers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Shira Hammond. I'm a Skokie resident and have been very involved over the last year in speaking to the needs for sustainability in our town, where we have made a tremendous amount of progress. And I'm here today to speak on housing, which I do not think is a disconnected topic. I'm very grateful that this commission is addressing this topic. The sustainability plan put together by Pale Blue Dot last year specifically addressed the need for affordable housing as well, because true sustainability involves sustainability for people living here. It involves an ability for people not to be in a state of desperation, but to be in a state of where they can think forward, where they can look forward to the long-term health of our community. It requires us all to feel that we are in this together. I don't think that we can have one without the other. I think that this is where we decide what our values are. This is where we decide who we are as a community. And this is where we decide what we want for our children and for our future. And if we want to be a place where we can all feel comfortable together and where there isn't some hierarchical and oppressive system in place that leaves some people desperate and other people having. And if we want long-term for all of us to be able to survive and thrive, I think that we have to take these needs very seriously. And I hear a lot of fear, and I heard it around sustainability as well, of, well, if we do anything differently than what we're doing now, maybe there'll be a tremendous uprising. Well, what about the tremendous uprising if we do exactly what we're doing now and people are terribly impoverished and suffering and struggling? What about the tremendous suffering that comes long-term from a lack of a larger view of our futures and where we're headed? When we stop supporting each other, when we start saying we can barely think about doing anything before we, at a time when we know that the need right now is very great, then we put ourselves in a different kind of danger. And it sounds like from all of the folks who know far more about it than I do, that 15% is a very reasonable number that is being accepted by many communities in the area, and it is not revolutionary. Just as once a week trash pickup wasn't revolutionary and having sustainability goals wasn't revolutionary. It is not, nothing being proposed here is revolutionary. What is being proposed here is things that have been tried out by communities around us and succeeded with communities around us. One other thing I'll say from the sustainability effort that carries over here is the need for an ongoing plan, the sustainability plan, and a commission that supports it ongoing. Okay, come on, sweetie. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time to this.
Good evening. My name is JJ Avaska. I live in the 8900 block of Forest View Road in Northeast Skokie. I want to thank the trustees, the Plan Commission, the village staff for embarking on this process to develop policies on affordable housing. I grew up in Skokie in the 1980s and 90s and returned in 2017 with my wife and 3 kids to be closer to the grandparents. I believe the long-term financial health of Skokie and the health of its tax base depends on having a diverse housing stock that its community members can afford. Community where over 35% of its current households are spending way too much on housing, and where the average Skokie worker's wage isn't nearly enough to afford the average rent, has a serious and urgent problem on its hands. I would encourage, it's not a trade-off. Affordable housing and the health of our tax base are not a trade-off. The 2-flat across the street from my house provides more taxes to the village than my single family, and it provides more affordable housing. It does not have to be a trade-off. When families have more disposable income, they can spend more money on restaurants, they can spend more money on activities. It's going to be a healthier Skokie. So this does not have to be a trade-off. And so because of this, I was very encouraged when you kicked off this process. I'm a bit discouraged that I feel like as great as the recommendations are, the spirit of being cautious, while I understand, I think we have to be honest that it does not add up yet to a solution that is commensurate with the challenge in front of us. I can respect an incrementalist approach, but only if it's done right. And I think to do it right, I think we have to be honest that even a year from now, I don't think we can imagine that somehow a temporary task force is going to somehow write a magic chapter in the comprehensive plan that will solve everything. I think the odds of not needing a housing commission a year from now are incredibly low. So why not send that clear signal? And I think that's probably the most important thing. What are you voting on tonight that will send a clear signal that the steps being taken over the next year are simply the initial down payment that we are committing to actually tackle the size of the problem? Thank you.
My name is Shelley Pat. I'm a longtime Skokie resident, and I just wanted to put a few thoughts out for whatever is going to be decided tonight. I'm noticed so much of the conversation has been around owner-occupied homes, and we want to make sure that people can afford to stay living in the homes that they own and that they have equity in, which is, of course, a wonderful goal, and I, as a homeowner, really appreciate that thought. But that, wow, everyone who has equity in a home is already way ahead of the people who are desperately in need of affordable housing. And the focusing on owner-occupied housing, even as we're talking about the many multifamily buildings in Skokie, there is nothing without an affordable housing ordinance, and I recognize that what we're talking about tonight might not be addressing this problem, but again, thinking down the line, multifamily housing where an owner lives in one unit and rents the others doesn't guarantee that those units are livable, doesn't guarantee that those units are affordable. Before coming to the meeting tonight, I was looking on Zillow. There's a 3-flat on the south part of Skokie where a 2-bedroom is going for $2,100, which I think anyone in this room could agree is not affordable to a family with children. Accessory dwelling units will not solve the problem. And most homeowners cannot figure out how to afford to make basic repairs, much less being able to afford an accessory dwelling unit, and those who build them might then just simply rent them out as luxury units for someone who has can afford more. And I'm very dismayed to hear the language that we don't care about the people who don't live here. Skokie was built on people who don't live here. This room is full of people whose parents and grandparents moved to Skokie in the 1950s and 1960s because Skokie progressively decided to have housing policies that truly did welcome everyone when surrounding neighborhoods and suburbs did not. And right now, the minimum wage in Cook County, someone who is lucky enough to work full-time would be making about $28,000 a year on a minimum wage job, which, as I've mentioned in comments here before, includes jobs right here in Skokie. I understand this concern about, oh, could we tailor it for essential workers? How about just tailor it for workers? Maybe the person who is moving to Skokie right now works somewhere else, but would love to work in Skokie and doesn't work here right now. Trustee Sutker spoke about her niece, who I have worked with, who one thing Trustee Sutker didn't mention is her niece not only can't afford to live in Skokie, but works in a Skokie school and is providing an environment for families who would like to live in Skokie. And just something needs to be done because we can't just focus on the homeowners. We need to focus on renters too. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rachel Gradstein. I grew up in Skokie and now live here with my family. In less than 48 hours, this letter was signed by over 325 residents, homeowners, and voters of Skokie. I am one of the signers. Addresses weren't provided because people were fearful of retribution. We, the undersigned residents, homeowners, and voters of the Village of Skokie, express our concern over the proposed affordable housing policy of Skokie. We all chose Skokie to live in because it is a diverse community that values everyone that is part of that whole. We all chose Skokie because it is a safe, growing, and economically sound municipality. We are proud of the fact that everyone lives harmoniously in our village. We recognize that affordable housing is part of what is important to the fabric of Skokie. It has occurred naturally without legal requirements, and we are at the highest rate, almost 20% on the entire North Shore. The state of Illinois recently decided not to increase the current mandate of 10%. We feel what has been happening naturally has been working, as we already have the highest rate of affordable housing on the North Shore. We should celebrate this reality, not impose standards that might disrupt what is naturally occurring. We believe that the key to affordable housing is more housing stock and different types of housing. The availability of plentiful housing holds down costs. Enforcing affordable housing policies may likely diminish new construction. Creating untested policies that exceed state standards can certainly disrupt our housing market and economic development. In sum, we want to encourage new housing developments without a legal requirement for affordable housing. In the event the Board of Trustees feels a mandate is necessary, we would encourage the mandate to only go into effect when the affordable housing level reaches 12% or below. This will ensure that there is a safety net for a necessary level of affordable housing stock within our community. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Carrie Bradan. I am a Skokie resident. I am grateful to see the movement of this board towards a real focus on affordable, inclusive housing, away from the previous pattern of approving all luxury housing, which, as has been mentioned, probably means we're actually far lower than the 19% or headed there soon as those units go on the market. And I thank everyone who has put in so much work on this already. And again, thank you, Trustee Sutker, for your comments about the very real barriers to living in Skokie for so many people. So on this May Day, let's honor all the workers who make everything in our lives possible and make Skokie actually affordable for all our workers. I think we need to pass an inclusionary zoning ordinance of at least 15% in all developments, not only over a certain level, and definitely not 5 to 10%. As I said in my comment at the last meeting, and as you echoed tonight, Trustee Johnson, I appreciate that a 5 to 10% requirement would ultimately result in a decrease of affordable housing in Skokie over time from that current up to 19% that we're working with. I must say I'm confused as to what the 5% requirement would even mean for a 12-unit building. That's 0.6 units. I don't know what that is. The math doesn't add up to a single affordable unit until you get to 20 units at the 5% level. It doesn't make sense to me to pass an ordinance that would be lower than the state's 10% requirement, especially when we know how many individuals and families are struggling to pay for housing here and are being displaced. And with all due respect to the signers of that letter, there is a problem. What's happening naturally isn't working for a lot of people. Children being uprooted from their schools, families being moved out, people facing life in homeless shelters. It's not working. And so to say that it's working, I think, is turning a blind eye to what your neighbors are telling you when they're telling you about their pain. We need to make sure that all our neighbors who live and or work here can afford to live here. I don't want to live in a community that pushes out everyone but the wealthy and doesn't make it affordable to all the workers to live where we work. When we can live where we work, we reduce traffic and improve air quality. We increase time for parents to spend with their kids. We improve mental and physical health, community and school stability, and so much more. Moreover, as Gail mentioned, nationally, the average inclusionary zoning rate is 16%. 15 is not high. It's actually below the national average. Only 5% of the inclusionary zoning programs in the country are under 10%. 5% is incredibly low and very rare, very uncommon. It's far below where it should be. So Skokie should be a leader. Let's lead. Let's not fall behind. Thank you.
My name is Roxanne Salgado. I wasn't planning on speaking. I've just been following what's been going on, but I just want to thank you all for having this discussion, allowing it, and then community members, you're awesome for showing up and constantly speaking up. You have a wealth of resources here. Gail, that other gentleman from Community Partners. So what I've been hearing a lot is you comparing or asking questions about comparing Skokie to other cities in the area. And what Carrie just said, be a leader. You have a wealth of resources. Gail just explained incentive for builders to have more than 16% affordable housing. Use the wealth of resources that you have. Listen to the community. Be a leader. Don't follow. Lead the way. We are in a crisis right now. And the language I have to say from certain trustees here about outsiders, not wanting them here, or focusing on people who already live here. The hate crime or hate crime intervention, prevention that was proposed last time is directly connected to that language. And so that's why affordable housing is needed, to allow a diverse community here so that we don't, that fear, where that language comes from, isn't real. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, there's this fear of uncertainty of allowing outsiders to come, when really it's just humans that need a place to live in a safe community that's affordable to their families. Thanks.
Hi, Bob Quain, 5458 Greenleaf. I think I'd like to echo what our speaker just said. I mean, this board has a reputation of making bold decisions. This board has a reputation of leading. This board has a reputation of effectively representing the values of this community. I think back to getting behind the mall. I think back to the public health as it relates to smoking. I think about public welfare as it relates to the assault weapons ban. And many, many other things that this board has done that were controversial. But you made those bold decisions. So I'm a fan of 15%. As it relates to affordable housing. I'm a fan of mixed AMI in the context of that affordable housing. There are a number of communities that have a rate that's much more than 5% and are still able to attract a number of developers. You know, Evanston, Northbrook, Palatine, Schaumburg, Arlington Heights, for example. They're doing it.
Arlington Heights is 7.5.
7.5. Yeah, yeah. I guess. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my point is
They're
that.
not 15%.
Yeah.
None of them are.
Right. My point is that they have the inclusionary ordinance and they're still attracting developers. And it could be 10, it could be 15, it could be 20. I think we can do better, however. Again, reminding you of the values of this community, better than 5%, without a great risk to economic development. And I'm also concerned about, I'm also a fan of the benefits of the Affordable Housing Trust and the Land Trust and all the great things that could come out of that to help people here in Skokie. In addition to upgrading some of the existing housing stock, we really haven't talked about the quality of the existing affordable housing. I want new, safe, and clean housing for people in Skokie. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jason. I'm a Skokie resident. What has occurred to me sitting here tonight is We have a lot of questions that have seemingly gone unanswered. We all seem to cherry pick different things that we all want to promote. My biggest thing is I want to look at this strictly from an economic standpoint. And I am simply saying here tonight that we want to encourage development within Skokie as best we can, because ultimately what will make things more affordable for all of us residents, will be more product on the market. The issue at hand that people have mentioned today, that things are unaffordable in Skokie, with all due respect, we have the same problem all over America. There's not enough supply, and that is what is driving prices up. The only way to change affordability is to add supply to the market. I don't know ultimately, I don't think any of us know ultimately, if we create a mandate at whatever percentage it is, how it will affect things. And that's my concern, is we don't have those answers. So ultimately, I look at us and say, other municipalities that have 20% affordable housing, by the way, we should applaud Skokie for being so diverse and so exceptional to be on the North Shore and to have that type of affordable housing. I'm proud as a resident. I think we should all be proud of that. Moreover, I would ask that, knowing other communities on the North Shore, if they have the current level that we have, which nobody else does, but if they did, what type of affordable mandate have they implemented, and how has that helped them create more housing or not helped create more housing? I would also say, other municipalities on the North Shore, what have they mandated and how has it been affected? Have they had more development or less development? Okay? And I would also say, we need to do more research as it relates to, if we are going to have a mandate, whatever the percentage is, how is that development before and after that plan change? How has it affected things? So I kind of circle back to, there's a lot of questions. Ultimately, I think this is, Skokie should be proud that we are at 20% affordability, that we are the leader on the North Shore, and I see absolutely no reason why we should have a legal requirement to impose any mandate whatsoever. The suggestion in this letter that was circulated, that was signed by, it sounded like 300 plus people, is amazing. There's so many people, I would say the majority of people of Skokie do not want a mandate. They just don't, because they see it's working the way it is. We have a very diverse community. We are the leader on affordability in Skokie, and we see no reason to potentially harm ourselves by stifling economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion before us.
Can we go over it?
Yeah, well, Allison, do you want me to summarize it, or do you want to? Why don't you summarize it?
I think I'll summarize it. I would like to make a motion, or repeat my motion, that we adopt the following affordable housing policy recommendations. We adopt the goals as outlined by the Plan Commission report, and if you would like me to reiterate those goals, Mayor? Should I reiterate the goals that are in the Plan Commission?
I think we all.
Okay, so goal A, B, C, D, and E as stated in the plan. I also would like to see that we produce an ordinance consistent with the reports on inclusion zoning, establish a fund whereby the village can accumulate money to establish a Skokie Land Trust as recommended by the experts before the Plan Commission, and that we update the village comprehensive plan by creating a subcommittee of the Plan Commission made up of representatives from a cross-section of the commissions and representatives of, right now I have our upcoming districts. Can I amend that? Okay, thank you. And representative of quadrants, diverse quadrants within the village, whose charge is to update the housing chapter of the village's comprehensive plan, and that we adopt a 5% inclusionary housing for all new development.
Do we have any amendments that anybody wants to make? Trustee Johnson?
I wanted to, well, first I just want to say,
We have a second. It's done.
so there's a second, so we're going to vote on this motion?
No,
If
no.
there's a second.
There is a second.
Okay.
The motion is on the floor. I'm just asking for a summary so everybody knows.
First, I want to say, I think what I appreciate about the first part that you spoke earlier about is that there's a lot of recommendations that we're being asked to consider, and inevitably, we're going to have to really prioritize which of these recommendations we want first. I agree with the mayor that inclusionary housing should be at the top of the list, because developers really need to know what they're getting into. This motion is about the goals. In staff's presentation, what we have received from our professional staff and from our plan commissioners that we appointed is a 14 recommendations. But in this motion, there's only 3. Instead of making amendments to this motion, I would like to ask the board to consider voting down this motion and then starting over with a very simple main motion to accept staff's recommendations as presented and then make amendments. But I'm open to hearing.
Is there a second to the motion? Motion dies for lack of a second.
Oh, that wasn't a motion, that was a suggestion to the board, because we're gonna have to vote on this motion, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought that, okay. That's fine. Trustee Robinson.
I'd like to make an amendment
Okay.
that the subcommittee, that trustee Pure Slovan, not only be responsible to make an update with the housing chapter, but also make a recommendation of the role and responsibilities of a housing commission.
Yeah, that would be, yes. That would be an explanatory, yes. That would be part of the ordinance. 100%. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
If we're gonna put this motion to a vote, I wasn't planning on doing this, but if we're gonna put this specific motion to a vote, I would like to propose some amendments to include some of the other staff recommendations that were in the report that we received. Because to be honest, I wasn't expecting us to, I was kind of entered this discussion tonight thinking that it was really gonna be a question of whether we were gonna go above the recommendations that we got. I wasn't expecting a motion to only approve 3 of the 14 recommendations.
I was gonna say you can make an amendment.
All right. I guess I'm gonna have to go through some of these specifically. What,
Let me ask a question. Are we really prepared as a board to make votes this evening and judgments on all of the other parts of this? It would seem to me that those recommendations, other than the 4, there are 4 here, would be part of the charge of the subcommittee to take a look at all of those and put them in the comprehensive plan for us to achieve. I don't know about all of you. I'm not prepared to vote on accessory use.
well,
I'm not prepared to vote on the others. These I'm prepared to vote on because these are the 4 major parts of the Plan Commission's recommendations. There are many other recommendations that are embedded in that plan, but I don't know about the rest of you. I'm not prepared to vote on those.
just kind of a response to that point, I think there are some recommendations in here that I think we're ready. Like, for example, we approved a very substantial sustainability plan last fall that included goals that we have already voted to support about increasing housing density. So, I mean, I think the recommendation for accessory dwelling units, for example, it fits in very nicely with the sustainability plan that we have already voted to adopt. So I think we're ready for more than more than this.
If I can speak to my intent of what why I'm making these suggestions, and please remember that I am, it was for recommendations, but also that we are going to adopt the goals as set by the plan, so I guess is that a fifth? But in having said that, I agree with my intent is that we need to start somewhere. There is too much in there, and I believe that this is a springboard so that we can begin the process. And I do look to the subcommittee to come back with us. If we have to go through every single point, which I don't disagree, there is a lot in there to digest. I am not personally ready. I have so many questions outlined on all the plans, on every paragraph, that I would then say we would have to table this and not move forward. In my opinion, if I had to vote on the whole thing, I would not, because I am not prepared, and I don't feel I can make a rational, educated decision. But I don't want to hold anything up. So that's why I'm suggesting that we move forward with some of the recommendations so that we can get the process going. I don't want to hold back the affordable housing.
I understand.
And I think for this community to adopt inclusionary zoning is a big leap forward. To establish the idea of creating a land trust is a giant step forward. And to adopt the goals as set forth in the plan is quite a bit for this village to chew on. And this should be interpreted as the beginning, not the end of our work ahead of us. Trustee Sutton.
I would at least like to amend it.
Can you put the microphone closer? Thank you.
To at least adopt the Plan Commission's recommendation to require the 10% affordable units for developments with 151 units or more. I know this, you're all saying this is a start, and I appreciate that, but I would at least like to go up to the 10% for the 151 units or more.
The Plan Commission inclusion.
Yes.
Is there a second to the amendment? There is a second. Call the roll on.
Wait, if the amendment is part of the motion, then I want to bifurcate. We'll vote on.
We're voting on the amendment, that's all.
Oh, okay.
That's all.
I apologize.
We're voting on the amendment.
Which one? There are a couple.
No, there's only one on the floor. There's an amendment that Trustee Sucker just proposed that we adopt the Plan Commission recommendation on inclusionary zoning, which is the
Yep.
cutoff, you start at 11 units.
Yep, and then Trustee Robinson also had one for the.
He said he didn't need it.
No, Trustee Robinson's is going to be, is part of what Trustee Pure-Slovan is suggesting.
I thought it was in addition to.
It will
Because it
be.
sounds like initially with your motion, it was just to improve the housing chapter. I wanted it also to have a recommendation of whatever the roles and responsibilities would be for the Housing Commission.
Right, and that will be in it.
And I'm
Yeah.
confused about the percentage and where we're at with that. Sorry.
It's 5% is what is in your motion.
Correct.
Trustee Sutker is proposing an amendment to that, which would adopt the Plan Commission's recommendation of 5%, 11 units to 150, 151 and up would be 10%.
And I want to make sure it's clear that it's the 60% to 80% mix.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my amendment. And it's got a
Sorry,
second.
Trustee Kuhn.
Do we vote on that separately, the amendment?
Yep,
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just want clarification.
yep. Trustee Kuhn.
I would like to add an amendment that we review the inclusionary zoning once approved after 1 year, so that we can see what impact it has.
Okay, will you accept that as part of your motion? That way we can.
Yes, I'll accept that. Thank you. Good idea.
I know we've made lots of amendments and stuff like that. Respectfully, I want to go back to some of the things that were said earlier. You know, we are, our tagline is Village of Vision, and we have a history of taking, you know, bold steps. I think if our incredible professional staff and our very qualified plan commission has given us these 14 recommendations with their full support, I think it would be inappropriate for us to vote on less than half of them tonight. You know, how we want to prioritize, that's, I think, a great conversation, but respectfully, I would like to ask the board to consider voting against this motion and restarting this conversation with a main motion to accept staff's recommendations in full as they have been presented to us.
Okay. Call the roll. We're voting on the amendment that's been proposed by trustee Sucker. Yes,
But there's two aspects in the amendment now.
that's right.
No, I'm correct, right?
Yes. It's the,
Can we separate them, because what if I
Do-
want one
okay.
and not the other?
all right. Okay, you want to separate them? We'll separate them.
Thank you.
First is Sutker's amendment, which is the Plan Commission recommendation of 5% and 10%. Everybody understands what that is,
Thank you, sir.
correct?
To
Okay.
include the AMI.
Yeah, including the AMI, yes. Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Respectfully, I'm going to vote nay on this.
Trustee Pure Slovin,
Nay.
Trustee Klein,
Nay.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye. Motion passes. Second motion, trustee Kuhn,
Was to review what's
the
been,
impact of
Yeah,
this
in 1 year.
after 1 year?
Yep.
Is there a second to trustee Kuhn?
to review the impact of the inclusionary policy after 1 year.
I'll second.
Second? Any comment or question? If not, call the roll on trustee Kuhn's amendment.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
Aye.
Trustee Pure Slovin,
Aye.
Trustee Klein, Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye, the motion passes. Before us now is the motion, the pure Slovan motion as amended by Sutker and Kuhn. Everybody got it? We all got it, okay.
I think I got it.
Call the roll, please.
Trustee Sutker,
Aye.
Trustee Robinson,
Aye.
Trustee Kuhn,
Aye.
Trustee Johnson,
I'm going to vote aye, just because I've been waiting for an inclusionary zoning ordinance for a few years, so there's no way I'm voting nay on this. But I'm going to vote aye, and then after we're done, I'm going to make some additional motions to consider some of the other aspects of this report for the board's consideration. So I'm voting aye.
Trustee Pure Slovin,
Aye.
Trustee Klein,
To be consistent, nay.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Aye. Motion passes.
I'm going to start with the one I was most excited about. I move that the board supports staff's recommendation to update the zoning code to allow accessory dwelling units.
Have you gotten a report on impermeable surface regarding this? I haven't.
This is,
Accessory buildings have to do with the impermeable surface, which is in our zoning code, so we can't hear that now.
Well,
We
let's,
don't have it.
first of all, we can't even discuss it unless there's a second.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay. What did you, say, can you reiterate that, please?
I remember word for it. I moved that we support staff's recommendation to update the zoning code to allow accessory dwelling units. And I just want to point out that, this will inevitably have to come back to the board. You know, this is just signaling that we want to initiate this process. So the questions you have, Trustee Klein, about parking or whatever, you know, permeable surfaces, you know, we would have time to deal with these. Accessory dwelling units. We're talking about,
Please, but
accessory dwelling units could be a coach house, it could be a garden apartment, it could be an internal accessory dwelling units where you kind of break up a single-family home into 2 internal flats. It would give a lot more. Oh.
sir, come to the microphone. We have to do this because it has to be recorded.
That's okay. You say accessory dwelling permit. Which one are you referring to? Because there are a lot of definitions, and that's why I'm asking what it is. I'm not debating whether it's yes or no. I'm just trying to understand.
I'm going to read you exactly what's in the staff report. Accessory dwelling units are coach houses or smaller apartments within an existing home or part of a detached structure. They can serve as housing for caregivers, extended family members, or be leased to help bring new income to properties to keep homes affordable for property owners. Approximately 1/3 of the land use in Skokie is devoted to single-family housing units, and the creation of new, smaller housing units supports utilizing this land for new housing in a landlocked community.
I've spent a lot of time trying to read building permit, the Skokie building permit, to understand exactly what things are and what things are. There's no definition of what coach house is or what it is not. And I would argue that until you define exactly what you're talking about with specificity, you can't vote on it. I don't care whether it's yes or no. I'm just saying you need to define it.
This would have to come back in an ordinance form with very specific.
But I don't think we should be voting on it until we know exactly what we're voting on. The gentleman raises a very legitimate point. I'll reiterate what I said before. I think we've taken a giant leap forward by passing Trustee Pure-Slovin's motion as amended. I think the other components of the Plan Commissioner's recommendation is something that the subcommittee should take up and include or not include, but study in some detail the rest of the recommendations for a rewrite of our housing plan.
Am I allowed to go to the microphone and say something on this? I built an attached garage. It had to be a certain size because I couldn't go below the permeable surface. So approving accessory dwellings, which are not allowed in Skokie, wouldn't change any other zoning unless you changed that zoning, if I'm correct.
By legal definition, a garage is an accessory building. So all you have to do is have somebody want to put hot water in there, and you have a different kind of residence.
I just went through this, Trustee Klein, I'm telling you, in 2016, and I had to make the garage smaller because I could not, I'm answering your question from my own experience about permeable surfaces. Went through it with my patio too, all sorts of calculations and this and that. So what I'm saying is approving an accessory dwelling unit, which is defined in the staff report, would not change the permeable surface requirement unless you also change the permeable surface requirement. I mean, I think Trustee Johnson just read a definition that is in the staff report of what an accessory dwelling unit would be. You could hash it out in the ordinance, and I'm not seeing, it would have solved my problem with my great uncle because he couldn't come out of the basement because he couldn't do the stairs. And there was only a bathroom upstairs and downstairs, and we couldn't lift him. So for the last 2 years of his life, he lived in the basement like a hermit.
I just want to point out that, you know, this is not my recommendation. This is coming from our staff. This is coming from our Plan Commission. And we've got, in a lot of the, you know, we've gotten a lot of public comments through this process. And I just want to point out, even some of the, even a number of the public comments that we received that were really questioning the push for affordable housing policies, even some of those commenters acknowledged that they liked the idea for accessory dwelling units. So I think this specifically is a something that has wide support. But we had a second.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I agree with that, but I need more information. I just need to really understand. And what I'm hoping is this subcommittee, that would be one of their tasks, to provide that information.
Are you withdrawing your second to the motion?
No,
Okay, okay,
no.
okay.
Okay, call the roll.
Trustee Sut,
Can you repeat the motion, sir? What is this for?
To adopt the Plan Commission's recommendation
For
on accessory dwelling
accessory
units,
dwelling
correct?
Which says update the zoning code, correct? Update the zoning code to allow accessory dwelling units. I don't know what the update is.
Well,
Okay,
this
okay.
would come back
Just
to,
wanna make sure.
this would come back to us at some point.
Okay, I just
Yeah.
needed to understand that. Thank you.
I don't feel ready to vote on this,
Then vote no.
so I'm gonna vote no.
Trustee Robinson,
No.
Trustee Kuhn,
Abstaining. Abstain.
Trustee Johnson,
I vote aye.
Trustee Pure Slovin,
I'm only voting no because I don't feel that I have enough information to put myself in the position to vote affirmatively, so I am voting nay.
Trustee Klein,
I vote no.
Mayor Van Dusen.
Nay.
All right, I'm gonna move to one of the, some of the staff recommendations that we haven't voted on yet. They're about Goal B, preserving, protecting, and improving Skokie's existing affordable housing. I want to start with like a real easy one. One of staff's recommendations was to create a residential vacant home registry. I move we adopt staff's recommendation to create a residential vacant home registry.
Excuse me, Mayor, can you tell us what page of the recommendation's on? I need to read, I'm a visual person.
It's on page 142 of tonight's agenda. I'll just read it. Vacant homes are scattered throughout Skokie and have the potential to become problematic and a nuisance to the neighborhood. They generate complaints. As the deferred maintenance on these homes escalates, major building components fail, and homes are often prospective tear down or rendered cost prohibitive to reoccupy. Yeah, this is just, it's just a staff recommended that we create a residential vacant home registry.
And that is very generic. What do you mean by a vacant home? Who's going to declare it vacant? I got a phone call the other day from a gentleman who just so happened keyed in on this, and he was absolutely petrified about, and I was at a loss. I simply told him, I said, well, I think it's a good idea, but it needs further development. We need definitions. What is a house that is vacant? And if a house is vacant, but it's being kept up, what do you do? Why, again, I think these are items that we do need to flesh out. I agree with the staff recommendation, but I'm not going to vote for it because I don't think we know exactly what it is we're voting for. And I want to be able to tell the gentleman exactly what this would be. And I would like to do some more investigation. The idea sounds good. I'm concerned about the implementation.
Mayor, if I may, I agree with you because we have snowbirds, and if they leave for 6 months to go to Florida, but they're upkeeping their home, is that considered a vacant home? I mean, it's vacant for 6 months. Is that something we should be concerned about? I don't think this has been flushed out enough because I need to understand, do we mean, as you said, Mayor, is it someone who's keeping up the home? Is it vacant for a year? What's the timeline here? And that's why I'm hesitant about that.
Can I make a comment? I want to make sure I understand. I feel like there is a goal that we're trying to work towards in terms of how can we improve current housing conditions in Skokie? How can we maintain or increase affordable housing in Skokie. The Plan Commission had a very short time frame to put together a recommendation before the board, and I appreciate the work that the Plan Commission has done. The way I'm reading it, this also is that there are a set of goals that we want to work towards, and there are a number of considerations and options that are on the table, and we also want to look at it as a whole, as part of a comprehensive plan when we think about housing in Skokie. And I want to look at it from, there were a lot of questions raised tonight when we talk about different demographics, who's going to be impacted, when we talk about senior homes, people who live and work in, there's just so many aspects of this that we need to consider. We're not going to solve the housing problem in one night. And I just want to make sure that, like, we're not arguing semantics either, and that, like, if we're working towards the same goal, and if it's going to come before the board anyway in terms of a formal ordinance that's a little bit more flushed out, there's been more debate, there's been more discussion in terms of the definitions and the criteria, that would be easier to vote on than just the general ideas right now, like, which I think for the most part, no one's really objecting to it. We just want to have some additional
Right.
information where we feel confident about it.
Just as kind of a counter argument, I just want to point out, we voted tonight to establish a Skokie Land Trust, which is a very complicated thing, and we voted to approve it based on one paragraph in this report. So I don't, I think, I get the vibe.
I don't know about others on the board. I did not vote for the land trust based on one paragraph.
Right.
I spent a lot of time working on that, and I talked to several of my colleagues who have experience with it. I talked to a couple attorneys who have experience with it. I don't vote for things like this just on, well, there's a paragraph.
Also, if I may say that I was very careful in the language in terms of the land trust, and said we establish a fund where we can accumulate money as recommended by the experts who came before the Plan Commission. So we're listening to the people who have done the homework, so to speak, on it. You're right, I couldn't flush it out on my own, but we did have it. So it's not that we're picking and choosing, it's based on what information was given to us. And I refer back to that we need to go to the experts. Very careful in my language.
I won't, she's an all-star. I won't argue with you on that.
I think the full report that she gave us, I thought was pretty great. So I just want to give a shout out to our community development
She did.
department.
Her face is turning red.
I didn't mean to embarrass you.
Mayor, if I
No
can
more
just-
motions for me.
Okay, I was just gonna add to this briefly. The issue becomes, what are you gonna do with that list if you prepare it that's not clear? And the Second Municipal, unfortunately, or fortunately, is very reticent to take action against what is defined generally as abandoned or not in good condition. We've had a lot of experience in the second district on this issue. It really would need a lot more for it to be legally acted on. Still a great thing, but it needs more.
I would suggest to my colleagues, don't forget, we have an executive session tonight.
Can I just make one?
Very quickly, and then trustee Kuhn.
Well, this is not about, this is just a comment, not about what we're.
Briefly.
I just want to remind everybody that May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And if you know somebody that you think is suffering or that you see their behavior has changed, to please remind them that they can call 988 and get help, and also to ask them how they're doing and if they're okay. Just a connection like that can make a difference. So thank you.
Okay. Trustee Kuhn.
I just want to acknowledge the people in this room, the people who put in the work to do the research and provide feedback. This is a very complex issue that's affecting us today, and I appreciate the thought and that we're at least making progress, and that We can try to identify those areas where we can build upon, and let's continue to figure out how to make it better. And so this is not the end, that this is only the beginning and the foundation, that we can continue to work together and evaluate the other parts of the recommendation so that we can move forward together with a more comprehensive housing plan.
Well put.
Thank you.
Well put.
Before we get to citizen comments, I have a new business thing, but yeah.
Well, the next item would be citizen comments.
Well, next item is new business.
Okay, let's go.
All right,
We gotta
I know
get-
it's late. It's late. It's past 10.
I
Okay.
don't know about you, but we got to get inside.
I know.
so
All
we
right,
can take
2
it
items
up.
for new business. I'll try to be brief. First, I have an agenda item request. On Friday, just 3 days ago, the Illinois Attorney General's office released a determination concerning the village board and said that sadly we violated the Open Meetings Act during sections of our 2 closed sessions in January. And they have asked that the village board vote on publicly disclosing sections of the audio recordings of those meetings. And it wasn't stated in the determination, but my understanding is that they usually recommend action within 60 days, which for us would mean voting on this sometime in May or June. And so I would like to request from our village manager that we schedule this vote sometime in the next 3 meetings, either May 15th or June 5th or June 20th, whenever it's most convenient to add this to an agenda.
Well, she said it's not a binding decision.
It's not a binding decision.
Right.
It is still
And-
a very serious determination, so.
Well, not exactly, but it is being taken under advisement. It was only late on Friday that I got the letter, and it's very complicated, and it's not quite as simple as it sounds, and I'm looking into it.
I just, to be very clear, and I don't mean to be dismissive of what you just said, Mayor, to be very clear, as a trustee, I'm making this an explicit agenda item
I understand.
request. And so, unless the council would like to kind of veto that with a majority vote, I'm making this agenda item request for one of our next 3 meetings in May or June.
Do you want the whole thing released? No, do you want the whole
No.
meeting released? I'm asking.
Or just parts of it?
Or just parts of it?
So,
Come on.
let me, if we want to get into the termination, they mentioned 2 different meetings. For the January 3rd meeting, they actually, in the determination, they specified an exact time amount in the audio recording and just asked us to release a small 4-minute section.
No, you don't get the cherry pick.
For the January 17th meeting, they said that we do not have to disclose the entire thing, but
So
they,
we will release the whole thing and let everybody determine then. And
Well-
especially.
Let me, let me just
Yeah.
make a simple,
sure.
simple request. Let me review it,
Absolutely.
okay?
I'm just requesting that we.
This is going to, this conceivably can establish a very serious precedent. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not acquainted with the entire subject matter. As far as the jurisdiction and the language of the letter, I've talked to a couple different people very briefly about it, gotten 2 different opinions about it. So I want to take some time, take a look at it, and then I will make a recommendation to the village board.
Yeah, just to be really clear, I wasn't getting into the super specifics of the actual portions. I'm just asking that we follow up on their recommendation that we put this to a vote. So whatever we vote on is really up to this board. I'm just asking for an agenda item request that we get this on the agenda and that we actually vote on this.
It will be,
Yeah.
it will be.
I know we're past 10. You know, I'll skip the next part. It's late.
Okay, public comments. Is there anybody who wishes to address a very sleepy village board?
Hi, thank you. Gail Schechter again. I just wanted to speak to the inclusionary zoning ordinance that you passed. I'm really hoping that you can revisit that floor of, it should really be 15%. And I think the thought that I was hearing was that other communities are higher because they're trying to catch up. But I want to mention the city of Chicago has a higher percentage. In Pilsen, the alderperson, Brian Sigcho Lopez, was able to get a much higher percentage to stave off gentrification. So that's another real reason to have a higher percentage. And again, developers, it's important to be in sync with all the incentives, with all the laws, with the effort to keep current residents here. That 5 and 10% is way too low. And I'm sure that Mr. Lorge will come back with a draft ordinance, and we'll be back advocating for at least 15%. Again, Westfield is out there. They're going to be presenting something by the end of the year, and we want to be ready. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have mixed emotions. I'm grateful you're doing something, and I understand. I do feel like I agree that 5% is way too low. It's a little better than nothing, because anything would be better than nothing. 1% would be better than nothing. I'm pretty sure it's the lowest in the area. And to review it in a year, I think should be unacceptable. And we will be back at the next meeting, because I feel like, I don't understand. I feel like it was cherry-picked, the things that you don't have enough information about, and clearly you don't know what the sweet spot is, and you don't have enough information about that, but you did make a determination and set a number and take it. And I don't feel like that point was any more clear about why 5% was a good number, which I don't think it is. Sorry, Johanna, I like you too, and I love the report. I get it. I don't think 5% was a good number. I don't think it provided any more detailed information than anything else did. So the things that you didn't want to take up today, it was, I'm not against it, but we don't have enough information. But there really wasn't, it was a short time span for everything. No, that's actually not what I'm saying. I'm saying you could have worded it so that you wanted to look at experts. You could have worded it the same way you worded the land trust thing for an ADU unit. We want to approve ADU units in conjunction with verbiage from Johanna, our local expert, who is a rock star and can tell us exactly what ADU units are. If you wanted to do it, there was a way to do it. And if you didn't want to do it, it was easy to say, I don't have enough information.
Okay. Trustee Sucker.
I move we adjourn for executive session at 10:10.